So welcome. We are here today, IDs Without Borders, to talk about building opportunities with remote internships. I am Lainie Hoffman. I'm a senior instructional designer with the University of Colorado system.
And I am Jill Giacomini. I am also an instructional designer at the University of Colorado system.
And I'm Cristabel, Ocasio, Ilarraza, the intern. I'm a graduate student at University of Colorado, Denver in the Learning, Design, and Technology graduate program.
Yes, and just for the context, Jill and I for this internship served in kind of like the supervisory role. And as Chris mentioned, she was our intern. So we'll be kind of speaking from those two different perspectives throughout our presentation. So what you can expect from the session, we've divided it up into 4 sections here. We're going to start off with a bit of overview and background just to contextualize where we were coming from with this to help frame where we ended up. The second section, which is kind of the meat here, we'll be examining the structure of what we put together, and that is the part that we together to share and encourage other people to undertake the internship experience. And we'll spend just a little bit of time then talking about the impact, our personal impacts for us, as well as lessons learned. And then we will have time at the end for a formal question and answer. We will try and answer questions in the chat as we go along. But if there's something we don't catch, please feel free to catch us there at the end and ask again. So Jill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lainie. So as Lainie mentioned, we're going to start out today by sharing what we call the bird's eye view, just kind of a high level look at how this experience came to be. So again, as Lainie mentioned, we're going to start with the big picture, and then we're going to get into more of the details about how we structured this experience in just a minute. But to kind of give you a sense of our strategy for how we crafted this remote internship experience, we really didn't have one to begin with. We had this wonderful experience kind of brought to us unexpectedly. We have at the University of Colorado, Denver, we have the program that Chris is in. It's the Learning, Design, and Technology graduate program, and our department has a relationship with the coordinator of the program. And one day he came to our boss, Jason Drysdale, and said, we have a student who is interested in an internship in a higher education organization, and she'd like to learn about instructional design. Is that something you'd be interested in doing? And Lainie and I, Jason asked our team, and Lainie and I said, sure, yeah, we would like to do that. We didn't have a plan for doing that, but we were interested in doing it. And so basically just in sharing, an image is worth 1,000 words, as they say. We did not have a plan or a strategy for getting this program off the ground. And so you've never done anything like this before, you're in the right place. We're hoping that because we built as we were going, we built the plane as we were flying it, as they say. And so we're hoping that through our experience, we can kind of help you if you were interested in doing something similar. We're hoping you can borrow some ideas and build your own. So with that context in mind, where did we start? So Lainie and I said, sure, we would love to work with this person who we didn't know at that time, as her name is Chris, and we're really, at the time we didn't know it was Chris, but now we do, obviously. But at the time we met to prepare for this meeting, and we said, gosh, okay, well, we don't know what we're doing. Where do we begin? And so what we did is we started with what we already had and what we already knew, which is kind of the best way to begin when you don't have a plan. We identified 3 elements, and one is our office did as your office may. We had an onboarding document that we used for new employees, and obviously not everything in that document was going to be applicable to an internship. there's a lot of information in those types of documents that you don't think of that are important, contact information and you know, different websites and different things to know. And so that was a place where like, well, this would be a good place to begin. And so we started work modifying that. And then, you know, what else did we have in place? And we had been working during the pandemic. This began in October or September rather. It was a pandemic. We were using Zoom and we're like, well, we'll set up a meeting and connect with her. We've got Zoom, powerful tool. Let's begin there. But I think that the third thing that was really important when we began was Lainie and I had a discussion with Jason Drysdale, our boss, who said, you know, you need to make sure that you structure this internship around the goals and needs expressed by Chris. Because and I know that I personally am someone who likes to have a plan, likes to get things in place, likes to have things ready to go. But I thought that that was really good advice, and Annie and I took that information and we ran with it, where we really kept in mind that we weren't going to build, decide, you know, put anything in place until we actually talked to Chris to find out what her needs were and what her interest was in going through this internship experience.
So furthering that general thought, you know, the plus side of starting from scratch with this internship is that we were able to very easily take that general idea of we're doing this with the intern and run with it. So our approach and philosophy was really that we wanted to start from a place of curiosity and an interest in collaboration. We really purposefully wanted to stay away from what I think is kind of the classic starting point that people think of when they think about an intern and internship is, you know, what is the work the intern's going to get done, and move away from that and toward what are the goals for this experience. Our ID work, our instructional design work with our team is really framed around collaboration and appreciative inquiry. So we let that inform a lot of what we were doing, which meant that we had to resist the urge to plan too much in advance, which Jill and I are very much planners and we like structure. So that was a little bit of a challenge for us. And we instead started with a lot of questions, just, you know, hi, what do you want to get out of this? And we went from there. And we also made sure to get that back from Chris about what was her expectation for the experience. And we didn't start off with all the answers, but it made for a much better and more collaborative starting place than I think we would have if we hadn't gone that direction. And Chris, I think you had some things you wanted to add on here as well.
Yes, definitely. So the fact that Lainie and Jill used this appreciative inquiry approach for this internship made this experience completely different from what I was used to having in other internships. The fact that they didn't give me what to do, but instead they guided me in my process to achieve the goals that I had set out for myself was definitely made it a meaningful experience. Sometimes companies or institutions post interns because in their minds it's more like underpaid labor, and I guess that's fine. But the ultimate goal is for the intern to practice those skills that they need in the workplace, in a field, or in a particular industry to be successful. And however, that's not the only thing that interns should get out of an internship. Lainie.
Thank you. So kind of with those backgrounds in mind, you know, we were able to get started and get some goals in place. So the goals that we ended up setting up with Chris were a project goal, which she created a self-paced module to teach faculty how to more effectively and from a student-focused perspective, implement quizzes in their online courses, as well as kind of this broader career goal of deepening exposure to her experience with instructional design in the workplace. So we worked on those things from September to early January together, and then into the internship. And what did we realize? We realized it was wonderful. Jill and I got into this and we were like, yeah, it's like something we should do. Somebody needs to take care of it and we can figure it out. But we got to the end and we just realized that this was awesome. Like, we would recommend people do this on a regular basis. We want to do it on a regular basis. It was just so rewarding. So kind of with that in mind, we were like, well, you know, we started from scratch. What can we take away from what we put together for this and, you know, make it that much better next time around? And as we were reflecting on that, it was like, why don't we start sharing this with people? This is something, especially in instructional design teams, we haven't talked to a lot of other people who have hosted an intern. And so we wanted to take the opportunity to share, because sharing is caring, and and instructional designers are very good sharers, right? So that kind of gets us into this examining the structure, and this is where we'll get into a little bit more detail of, you know, what did this look like and what do we think that others can take away from this experience in building their own internship. So with that note, let's see here, I'm gonna, and I have it right here. So we do have this framework available to everybody. And the framework is full of questions just to kind of help from your own perspective, because we recognize not every organization is going to function the same way, but things that we extrapolated and took kind of at a high level that we thought would be useful to at least think through and address if you are hosting an intern. And so that URL is also available on all these slides in case you missed it here, and just let us know if you need it again. So let's see here. We had 3 main categories that we divided this framework up into: planning and organization, creating opportunities for connection. So that's kind of that community piece, which in the remote environment is particularly important, which I think probably everybody is aware of at this point in time with the amount of remote work everyone's doing. And then the third element, which we thought was really kind of the key to making this a truly meaningful experience, and that was establishing trust and facilitating growth. So we'll jump into each of those categories in a bit more detail and talk about what that looked like from the perspective of this particular internship.
Right, and also, as mentioned on the slide too, there is some overlap. When we were thinking this through, we were trying to make them discrete categories, and in some ways we were able to do that, but some things kind of fall into both categories. So just something to keep in mind. So the planning and organization piece is really the first component that Lainie and I, when we were reflecting on this experience, was like, okay, so how did we do this? What are the pieces of it? And that was the first thing that we thought about as really being an important building block. So what we're referring to when we're talking about planning and organization are those concrete, tangible plans and tools really that were put in place at the beginning. They provide the foundation to support the overall experience. It's not the experience itself, of course, but it provides the support for it. So you can think about these structure and tools that provide the space for those less concrete and tangible elements. So it's just being intentional about providing that structure. And I'll be more specific about that in just a moment. So what these do is they help everyone to get started on the right foot. It helps you to be intentional. Sometimes in a remote environment, you have to, not sometimes, always in a remote environment, you have to be more intentional than you do in a face-to-face environment about things like connecting and sharing. When you're in a face-to-face office, there's a lot of things that happen when you're at your desk and people are walking by and information is shared, and that doesn't just happen online. So that's where planning comes in. And also providing those tools, getting those tools in place to bridge that space and time divide more quickly. Again, you don't have the benefit of being in an office and being in that same space. So providing that space intentionally can really help to set a structure and a framework. So more specifically, how planning and organization look in this remote internship was, as I mentioned earlier, we modified that employee onboarding document, which kind of was the springboard. And again, a lot of offices have those kinds of documents, so it's a good place to start if you're considering doing this yourself. And then after our discussion with Chris and kind of getting a sense for the tools that she liked to use and how she liked to stay organized. We established Google Docs as a place to share our documents. It was our shared document repository. And it's just kind of the go-to place that we used as we went through the rest of the internship experience. And it was a no never mind. Once we'd made that decision, then it took care of, there was a lot less organization we had to do later because we knew that that was where we were going to go. Also, in that first meeting, we established an intentional communication plan. Again, something that you don't necessarily think about in a face-to-face environment, but since we were in a remote environment, we talked very specifically about what works for you, how do you like to connect, and what we came up with was we had a weekly Zoom meeting. We just set aside time on our calendars to, whether we had an agenda or not, to connect, and we always had something to talk about. Sometimes it was more organized and information packed with timelines and those types of discussions, and other times it was a lot, just it was more personal and just kind of connecting, which was nice. We also created a private Slack channel, which is nice because it's less formal, but it really facilitates that asynchronous communication. It feels like texting. And it just made it easy when information was shared. It made it easy to go back and find that. If we provided links to resources or anything like that, we knew that that's where we could go to find it. And then something else that we did that I think was really important is when we came up with these plans and talked about these ideas with Chris, Lainie and I went back to our team just to make sure that they were aware of what the plan was, because they were going to be involved in some way, shape, or form. And we wanted them to know who Chris was and to kind of get a sense for what we had talked about with her. Because, and this goes back to, and if you're in a face-to-face environment, people would see her, introductions would be very easy, people would know what was going on. When you're in a remote environment, those things don't happen unless you plan them. And so we planned it out, and we shared this information with the rest of the team. And again, then it was a no, never mind. And Chris, did you have some other things to share on the planning and organization piece?
Yes. So from my perspective as an intern, the fact that I was able to meet with Lainie and Jill through Zoom, have this Zoom meeting every week, allowed me with the space to actually update them on my progress about my internship report. Whereas the Slack channel provided us with that informal type of communication that we would have had if I was in their office, physically in a physical environment. So the fact that it was informal but made it so much easy to just have feedback on a weekly basis on those in between those formal meetings. Lainie?
Thank you, Chris. So, building off of the planning and structure, it's important to have community, and even more so in this remote environment where it's not just gonna, happen spontaneously on its own. So we needed to create opportunities for connection, and what that does for the internship experience is it allows our intern to start seeing themselves as part of a larger network. So whether that be, your immediate team or your larger organization, it adds to that sense of belonging. To get a sense of workplace culture, which that's always important if you want to get work done with somebody. Like you need to kind of know the ins and outs of the culture where you're going to be able to do things easily, or maybe you're going to need other people to participate as well. And then also, and this is huge for an intern, right? To begin to develop an identity as a professional. So for Chris, that specifically was about, what does an instructional design job look like? And what does that look like for me? And how do I connect to that? Maybe in a way that's similar to other people, or maybe in a way that's different. So in terms of specific things that we did to make this happen, that standing meeting Jill mentioned, and again, that was, to touch base, ask questions, but also just to chat. Like that was an important, we had lots of conversations about, you know, how did you guys get into this field? What is interviewing like when it comes to this? What are things people are likely to ask me? Things that are really helpful when you're getting into the field. And it's good to know that other people have had similar experiences to you, or, you know, that there's variable paths to getting to kind of this end goal of a job. We made sure to include Chris in a departmental meeting for a team introduction so that, you know, she wasn't a stranger in the background. She was somebody that everybody had met, and she had had a chance to kind of meet the team overall as well. And gave her access to team communications channels, which, you know, remotely, I'm sure every team kind of has a different setup. And for our team, we use the messaging system Slack, so that we can have both synchronous and asynchronous communications. And that's probably as close to like that busyness of an office that we've gotten to in the remote space. And so whether or not Chris participated in that a lot, she could at least kind of get that ambient noise of like, what does it look like to have a team talking to each other and communicating, and what are the sort of those behind the scenes components that wouldn't necessarily be obvious. We arranged one-on-ones with different team members so that she could meet the different folks across the team in a more personal capacity, and also get a sense for the different jobs that were represented in our group. And invitations to faculty-facing trainings that were hosted by our team, so as a special guest, so to speak. And
oh, go ahead.
oh, no, I was just going to turn it over to you. So we would love to hear more about that from your perspective as well.
So for me, being an introvert, I don't know if you could tell, me being an introvert and Hood being, you know, part of the team Slack channel was pretty intimidating, and I wasn't feeling like sure how to reach out to people, or they were all very nice and very welcoming, but I'm very shy in this type of thing, so it was very intimidating for me to just reach out to people in the Slack channel and just post something. Another thing that was kind of in the back of my mind, but I never realized it up until I finished the internship, was that there's a privacy or a security aspect to this type of thing. Adding an intern, an outsider in this sense, in the team Slack communication channel. So of course they never gave out like any sensitive information, but if that were to happen, I was completely aware that I was very responsible to not divulge that type of information. I guess it's something that is a concern for many people, so I just wanted to put it out there. Lainie?
Thank you.
Okay, and then that brings us to the third component, excuse me, that Lainie and I, upon reflection, realized that was a major component of this experience, and that's establishing trust and facilitating growth. So this is the component, and we talked about this, you know, when we were trying to conceptualize this, is this piece, which is kind of the coaching mentoring piece, is this essential to a remote internship experience? And where we landed with it is that probably it isn't, but it's really what makes it most meaningful from our experience. That as Chris mentioned earlier, there are some internship experiences that are more about, well, what work can we give an intern, and how can we give them that? And that's fine. That's one way of addressing it. But because the way that we intentionally approached this experience was more intern centered, that it really allowed us and promoted this environment in which we focused on this establishing trust and facilitating growth. So what that does then is it helps to connect. This is where some of that overlap happens. Yes, there's a connecting people phase, but this really helped Lainie and Chris and I to connect, not just as colleagues, but also as people. We really, because we put in that time meeting each week, it really gave us an opportunity to get to know one another. During last fall, which was such a challenge, it was really a nice experience to be able to make that connection with someone new. It also helped us to be intentional about exploring goals. You know, Chris came to us with an idea about what she wanted to do, but through that weekly process of discussion and reflection, those shifted over time. And because we had this time set aside to really connect, it helped her to evolve in her thinking, which facilitated that growth, which was really cool to witness. And also, we talk about multi-directional feedback. Certainly, it was a time for us to provide Chris with feedback on her project and her timelines, and give her you know, information to help her with her professional goals. But also it was really helpful for us to have information about the internship experience, and also to see have her ask questions about what we were doing. So that was it. And I'm moving on to how this looked. I've already kind of slid into this slide. So you got a sneak preview. Sorry. So how did this look? How did this look in our environment? As I mentioned, we worked together to establish those goals and timelines for project deliverables. And that was something that was constantly being revised based upon evolving needs. And it again created those opportunities for feedback and questions. One of the things that, because we had that time set aside for checking in, that we realized, and since this was the first time we'd done this, we realized that we hadn't given Chris enough of an overview of how our organization was, how our organization was set up. There are things, again, when you're in an office environment where people tend to get a sense for who's coming in, what their role is. And when we were, I think, about 6 weeks into the remote internship experience, I realized, you know, we need to be more intentional about like showing her an org chart and walking her through some of this. And so that's just an example of how that this piece looked for us. And then also, one of the other things that Chris did is really a big part of what instructional designer does in our department is to work one-on-one with faculty to design courses. And so she shadowed another instructional designer, Alexis, and I saw Alexis in here a minute ago. I'm not sure if she's still here. But Chris really enjoyed that experience, just gave her the opportunity to see how it looked, what that relationship was like, how that could unfold, and kind of get up close and personal. So those are just some examples of how that component looked in this experience. Chris, did you have other things to add to that?
Yes, I wanted to comment on the different bullet points that you have there. So definitely establishing this connection with Lainie and Jill, we experienced completely different and much more meaningful than other experiences that I've had before. That being said, I think that their approach to teachable moments was very humble. They're incredibly humble in sharing their knowledge. And that's something that I like about both of them. You know, they're not afraid to share what they know. And that made them very approachable and made me feel very at ease with communicating with them. The fact that they also asked me a lot of meaningful questions and not precisely requiring me to answer on the spot, but rather to giving me that space for introspection, which ultimately guided my design decisions and my design process. The last little bullet point was I did shadow Alexis. I learned so much from her. And that gave me the opportunity. I was able to offer some strategies for course organization and student engagement for that particular professor that she was working with. And it was, for me, a gratifying experience to be able to contribute to that process. Lainie.
Thank you, Chris. So again, we'll have time for formal question and answer. Hopefully everybody got a chance to look at that framework, and please feel free to ask us questions about that as well. But we just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about, you know, personal impacts. What was kind of the conclusion for each of us from a personal perspective? And so we'll just do a quick round robin of that, and I'll start it off. And you know, I think that Jill and I, and I'll try not to do too much for you, Jill. I just speak of us as one unit now. At least for myself, I jumped into this and I wanted to be helpful, and I wanted to give back to the program and help help an intern, accomplish their goals. But I didn't really anticipate the impact it would have on me, because it was just it. Not only did I get to meet Chris, who's just an amazing person, and it's so awesome to have her just my network of instructional designers, but also that opportunity to give back to the instructional design community, give back to the program was pretty incredible. And I just didn't anticipate it being quite so satisfying as it was. So, it was as much for me as it was for anybody else. Is kind of how I see hosting an intern. And I think that that's an important thing to be thinking about if you're considering doing it, is that it can be very personally satisfying to host somebody. Jill, I'll turn it over to you now.
I would agree, since we are of one mind. I agree with everything you said, of course. I agree with that, and I would add to that it was just very unexpectedly impactful to be able to see someone else entering into this field that I've worked in for quite a few years now, and experience her looking at everything with fresh eyes, and seeing her growth, and seeing her kind of find herself in this work. It was very, very cool. And I also, as I mentioned earlier, I really appreciated when you have this kind of a relationship, you're forced to examine what you're doing. And Chris asked us a lot of really good questions. Well, why do you guys do this? Why do you do that? And we usually had a pretty good answer, but there were some times when, I had to think pretty deeply. I'm like, well, I don't know, like maybe we should think about that in a different way. And it really
Yes.
is very, very cool.
And let's be honest, occasionally
me,
occasionally the answer was, because that's just how we've been doing it, and we don't know what the reason is. So that's pretty cool too, to kind of get that different perspective, and somebody asking questions in that regard makes our work better too.
For sure. Chris, what were your takeaways from this experience?
So definitely for me, I'm so grateful, and I'm just beyond fortunate to have had you both as my instructional design internship supervisors. I've learned so much from you, and I consider you my mentors right now. So I look up to you for all of this that is related to instructional design. So yeah, I'm super grateful. You guys are outstanding, talented, amazing instructional designers. Definitely very experienced, but also amazing. So I'm very grateful for that. The internship process made me realize how intentional the instructional design process actually is. And in this internship, I was able to practice and develop further all of the skills that I've been able to acquire throughout my time in the LUT program. And it also made me feel very confident about using those skills in particular. One thing that I would want to say, because I want to encourage other people to host an intern, is that interns in an internship will have many reasons to be there. One, they will be able to network with other people who are in the same field or industry they're interested in. They will be able to shadow those people. They will be able to find role models such as I have. And they will be able to practice those skills in a safe environment, the skills that are needed to succeed, to be successful in a particular field or industry. And ultimately, it will guide them to understand if this is the career they want to choose, if this career aligns with their skills, with their work ethic, and overall look on life. The last comment that I want to add is that I'm so impressed by Lainie and Jill. They're both UC Denver graduates. They now work at UC Denver as instructional designers, and they took me under their wing. And this is something that I don't want to do it now because I'm just, I'm about to graduate. But this is something that I've set out as a goal for myself in the future, to be able to pay it forward, to post an intern and hopefully become the role model in the same way that Lainie and Jill have been mentors and have become role models for me. Big news. And every time I talk about this, it's so funny because Jill just lights up. I was just waiting for her face. So big news. I just received a job offer for an instructional design position at a higher ed institution, and I will begin next Monday. So there is a happy ending for all this story and all the effort that all of us put into this internship. Oh, thank you. Everyone's saying congratulations. That's so nice. Thank you.
So exciting. It's very hard not to spill the beans. we planned it to save this till the end, and we're so excited for Chris. And I'm speaking for Lainie because we're of the same mind. Right,
Yes.
Lainie?
Yes. You didn't even need to say. We're now, we'll call ourselves Lil
That's right.
from now on.
Right. All right, so at this point, we as we mentioned, we want to answer any questions you have about this process, anything that you would like to talk about, and you can put it in the chat. And also, I think that everyone has the ability to unmute themselves. I think we've got a small enough group to where that should be manageable. So please feel free to throw your questions out there, and we'd be happy to answer them. Is there anything in the chat that we missed as we were going through?
Have you considered expanding the scale to include more interns? That's a good question. Thank you, Brad.
We haven't really talked about it, but it would definitely be doable, I think. And it would be kind of fun to think about if we had people at overlapping times. What would that look like with like a little cohort, right? Because that could be pretty cool, especially for some of the group learning and all of that. So I like that as an idea. Let's see here. Aubrey is asking. So, sorry, Chris, what did you say?
All of these questions are so good.
Oh, yes. Tim has a question about hours that you were required and set up on that.
So the internship course that I was enrolled in required for me to complete at least 90 hours of internship. So I tried to set out at least 15 hours per week to meet up with Lainie and Jill, to participate in all of the webinars and all of the self-paced courses that they offer through the ODE office, the Office of Digital Education, sorry, and just putting in all the work in my internships project. So it was 90 hours, but I did around 15 hours per week. Of course, it's kind of difficult not to not keep track of the hours. So I would, of course, exceed the amount of hours that I put in during a week, but I would count them as 15, more or less.
And that was really a part of that initial organization and planning. That was one of the things that we talked about in that initial meeting, like how many hours, how did you want to try and fulfill those hours? And then we had a place in the Google Docs or Google Drive repository for you to track that. It wasn't something that, was a huge thing, but it was helpful to have that in place so that you knew where you could keep track of that. So that was helpful. That was not something that we wanted to get to the end and then say, oh, shoot, wait a minute. Keep track of that.
So Aubrey asked a really good question. So I wanted to answer that as well, if you let me. So when I enrolled in the internship course, I didn't know that I was supposed to have an internship already lined up. So when I met with Brad, who was my internship professor, I was like, well, I don't have anything, but I'm really interested in working in higher ed as an instructional designer. And he was like, well, I know some people. Let me try to make a connection and I'll get back to you. And then maybe less than a week later, I was meeting Jill and Lainie for this awesome experiment that we were able to undertake. And that's how everything began. So I didn't really have anything lined up. And the fact that I knew Brad, that I was comfortable with him, and he, made the connection, made everything very, very easy. I hope I answered your question.
Well, and Aubrey, part of that too is why we really wanted to do this session today, because I hear you that it is tough maybe sometimes to find those opportunities. And now with remote, we've never met Chris in person. Like you were on the East Coast the entire time.
We're 2 hours apart, actually.
So what we're hoping is to kind of bring an awareness about that this can be done, and not only can it be done, it can be done very successfully. We're hoping that others will decide to do this, and with the remote aspect of it, that's with borders. Hopefully, it will open up opportunities for a lot more people to be able to experience an internship. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, and I see that Zelma, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, also included social media groups in LinkedIn and Facebook are a good place to meet, connect with people who maybe are looking for interns. I also run an instructional design group, if that's the industry you're in, called Pedagogy, and I can put the link to that, and that's also good for networking and just throwing questions like that out there. Oh. Thank you. Yes, that too.
See, I forgot to advance the slide to show. I really love this image of the dog, and I forgot to advance it till just now. So enjoy.
Any other questions for us or Chris? Or last thoughts from anyone? And I know a couple people mentioned also having their own experiences with internships or interns. If you have anything to add, we'd be happy to hear that as well.
And after the session too, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you're thinking this is something I'd like to do, but I really would appreciate more direction. We would be happy to talk with you one-on-one about your ideas and your thoughts about that too.
Thank you. Well, we'll hang out, but it looks like we ended just a couple minutes early. No problems there, huh?
Yeah, please feel free to stay if you have some questions you'd like to ask. But that's the end of what we have prepared for today. So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
And I won't start kicking people out for at least another 6 minutes or so.
Sounds good.
See if anyone wants to chat.
You can talk about anything if you want. We still have 15 minutes.
Well, I think it was to 250, right?
Correct.
Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
250.
Yeah, it was to 250. So we're good. We just had a couple of extra minutes.
Gives people time to go into the restroom, grab a bite to eat, and set up for the next sessions at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
All right, I am going to stop sharing. Oh, and I didn't, I just left my mic on the entire time, so I didn't accidentally without it on.
Is this where we're supposed to clap and say good job?
Yes.
You did it! Congratulations.
Hooray!
Awesome. That's great, Tim. And Tim, have you guys talked about doing remote, or are you thinking face-to-face or whatever happens to present itself? Oh, yeah.
Well, if you're like me and another one of my coworkers, we have a tendency to double mute ourselves, not only through Zoom, but then our headsets also have their own mute buttons as well. So it's like, wait, I gotta see which way. Where can I do this? I suppose I can stop the recording at this point too.